Welcome to Orange County Power Players, where we spotlight the personal, professional, and financial success stories of OC's top leaders. Here's your host, Danny Flores.
Welcome back to OC Power Players, where I interview some of the most successful people in Orange County. I'm Danny Flores, your host, and today's honored guest is Angelo Ponzi, zooming in from Trabuco Canyon. Businesses benefit from Angelo's extensive business-to-business experience spanning over 3 decades in marketing, branding, and research when considering why and when to hire him. With a proven track record of delivering tangible results across various industries, he brings invaluable expertise to the table, from crafting comprehensive, holistic businesses and creative brand strategies to executing impactful GTM plans. He possesses the skills necessary to enhance a business's presence and impact the market. Angelo's strategic mindset allows him to identify opportunities and devise innovative solutions, ensuring success in branding, brand building, repositioning brands, capturing market share, identifying new verticals, launching new products, or acquiring companies for growth. Moreover, his collaborative approach fosters open communication and teamwork, enabling more substantial outcomes, greater satisfaction for all involved. Welcome, Angelo.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, so tell us a little bit about craft and building better brands and how that works.
Sure. So the company, this company, because I've had others, is a little over 11 years old. And my last job prior to this, I was corporate side again. I've gone back and forth between agency, corporate, and consulting. And so I decided that I didn't want to be on the corporate side anymore, but I had a choice to make, and I could become an agency again. I'd already been through that. But I decided I really wanted to focus on what I love, and that's strategy. And that's basically helping companies better understand the markets in which they're competing. So using my research background, everything is fact-based. So we dissect competition, we talk to customers, we look at prospects, we do quantitative and qualitative research as we build and understand positioning and messaging, and then crafting plans. Where do you want to be in 3 years, 5 years? How do you want to get there? I hear all the time, hey, we've been in business for 20 years, but we're still only $10 million. But hey, we want to be 50 in 3 more years. All right, so what are you going to do different? And so really kind of understanding those nuances, looking at markets and customer segmentation, market segmentation. How do we, get more share out of the business that the segments we're already in? How do we go into new market segments? So that strategy approach, if you will, is where I focus. Ultimately, there's a tactical execution. I do get involved. I manage that. I'll work with internal teams, external teams. I don't really care. But ultimately, it's about having the right positioning and messaging to drive growth. And then that description I just gave also plays into acquisitions. You want to you have a strategic acquisition. People always talk about EBITDA, right? What are the financials? But my point is, that's great, but how do you put them together? Is it a corporate structure? Is it individual companies? Are you changing the brand? Are you cannibalizing your market? Are you adding new products? Are you going to pick up a lot of stuff that's not profitable? And then how do you protect the employees, right? People get scared. I've been through an acquisition, not only for myself, but for being acquired with a company I was with, and I watched the whole company change shape, and I watched people kind of leave because they didn't like what's going on. So how do you protect all that? So that's kind of where I get involved and what I really enjoy.
Right. Now, going back to the first part in kind of creating your data sets and trying to understand the market and how it maybe a particular client sits in that market. Once you have all that data, how do you execute and what are you trying to implement, say, to take that company from growth, right? From growth, like you mentioned, one that has the last 20 years, they've had 10 million in sales, and all of a sudden they want to 5x in 3 years. What would be the steps that you would take, one, after understanding their position in the market and what the competitors are doing? Is your focus on trying to advertise and trying to place the company on social media? Maybe it's customer acquisition, or what does that look like a little bit so that we kind of understand your strategy here?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. One of the issues I face, and I think other people do, and so I'm a fractional chief marketing officer, but that
Mhm.
word marketing automatically sends people to thinking about tactics. And
Mhm.
so there's a tactical execution, but by understanding who your customer base is or your prospect base, how they consume information, and the things that motivates them to want to either change to look at a new company or product, or be in a renewal situation, you have to understand all those details. And then ultimately out of that research comes how's the best way to reach them. But growth isn't just about getting on social media. I believe in integrated marketing. There's no silver bullet. One thing is
Mhm.
not going to solve. So you have to kind of look at your broad spectrum of businesses or that you're targeting, a customer prospect. There could be a hierarchy of people you need to talk to. So by knowing all that and how they consume, well, what's the right message? What's a relevant message that's going to make you motivated versus me motivated, right? So
Mhm.
all that work that I was talking about, those are the things we're looking for. How do I best communicate, say, to the executors that are going to do a social campaign? If you're talking to Danny, these are the things that
Mhm.
are relevant to him, is going to motivate him. But if you're talking to Angelo, he doesn't care about those. He cares about something completely different.
Right.
But you have to look at ultimately the market as a whole. And so I'm going to pick on a client, Southern California client, been around for probably 30 years now. But when I started working with them about 10 years ago, and to grow, we needed to identify where like businesses were around the country. So it wasn't like just a national rollout. We identified states that held venues that potentially would use our products and services, or the Christmas company. So you think about South Coast Plaza and all the big Christmas decorations. So that's
Mhm.
my client. I sit on their board. But as we looked about how do we grow across the country, we needed to identify where these opportunities were.
Mhm.
That created an issue because when we do installation, we can't be sending people from California, right? So now we needed to look at those venues. Now we need to look at, is there an installation pool of people that we could draw on? Then we had to
Mhm.
look at shipping. What's the additional cost to ship product from here, say, to Kansas? So then we needed to say, should we put a warehouse in the middle of the country, or do we want to put one on the East Coast to house products? And so strategically, we're looking at all those different pieces of how do we grow, because not all
Mhm.
business is good business, right? You get a giant project in the middle of the country and you're adding 20, 30% because you have to ship and ship, but send people and those kinds of things. So it isn't
Mhm.
just about the tactical execution of the social media or TV or radio, whatever it happens to be, right? Those are the kind of the arrows that you have in your quiver, and ultimately you're deciding what are the right ones to shoot. But ultimately you have to know what the landscape is, and you have to figure out how you're going to, scale the wall. I'm going to use
Right.
some
Right.
medieval
Right.
things, right? So
Yeah.
those are the things I think about, and not just tactically. It's tactically is important because you have to communicate, but you want to make sure you're communicating in the right way. I have a manufacturing client. It's like, hey, we need to be on TikTok. And it's like, there's absolutely no reason that you need to be, your customers are not there. Now, if you want to do it because you're looking to, build your following, that's one thing, but nobody that you're looking for is really going to look for you on TikTok. And so again, it's understanding where do you spend, and that leads back to budget. Where do the budgets get spent? I had a client that was in 5 vertical markets, and when we did the analysis, 2 of those vertical markets virtually never yielded any revenue, yet they were spending
Mhm.
40% of their marketing budget on it. So, we started to shift stuff around. They didn't have a strong website presence. That got changed. They didn't have then they got into e-commerce. And all of a sudden, 3 or 4 years later, they're doing a couple $1 million in e-commerce. That's just additional revenue that they never had
Mhm.
before because
Right.
we understood how their customers were looking to buy product.
So as a CMO, that explanation sounds really interesting because most of what you just said wasn't in, hey, we do social media ads and we go out, we spend X amount of dollars in marketing and we send out flyers. You mentioned really none of that. You actually came back and said, well, wait a minute, we have to strategically plan on how to grow and keeping costs down and creating efficiencies for that. And that's super interesting because you would almost think that a chief marketing officer is just marketing, like, hey, we're spending, we got to show our face, we got to run ads, we got to send out flyers, and it's not quite like that.
Well, there's, like I said, there's an element to that, but we want to make sure that they're relevant and efficient. It's like even, I'm broad in the sense of what I look at, and I get involved in process. I help evaluate, the products, looking at profitability. I mean, how many are driving revenue and profit? How many are driving revenue, but the profitability is bad? Which
Right.
ones that you love and you don't want to get rid of, but they're dogs and they're not doing anything for you. So
Mm-hmm.
from that profitability standpoint, you have to understand your product mix, but you also have to understand what's driving. You have to understand what the competition is doing. Are they encroaching on your market share? And if so, why? Why are those issues? I'm working with a client that sells through dealers. And they got a huge dealer base, but there's probably 100, 150 of them that are really driving all the revenue. So my challenge is, well, how do I add another 100 to that list? How do I take those other 600 that are not really doing anything and bring another 100 over? Because now I have to understand what they see as value and what's important to them. Before I ever say send out an email or I don't know,
Right.
right? You have to have that foundation. Think about it. I used this analogy earlier on, but think about uh, building a house, right? You and I just don't grab some nails and hammers and some wood and just start trying to build a house, right? We get an architect and they lay it out and they want to understand
Mm-hmm.
the flow and what we want to do and what rooms are going to be utilized. It's the same kind of thing. It's a kind of kind of an architectural approach to building your brand and building your business. Is you have to know what you want at the end result. Then we can start, because now we have a plan. Now we can start building, and that building now is whether it's social media or website or TV or videos or press release,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it happens to be, right? Where a lot of companies that I get these phone calls and say, hey, we need a social media program like right immediately. And it's like, well, but wait a minute. I don't do that. I want to do this. And then I can help you with that. But if all you want is that, I'll give you some phone numbers because I'm not your guy. And so
Right.
really is, and again, this is not something I just dreamt up. It's my, 3 decades of being in client side and working in manufacturing and working in consumer products and
Right.
running my own businesses and so that's ultimately what 11 years ago I said I want to focus there because I think that's the most important part.
Now, what has, if you can share like a case study of one client that you came in, and you mentioned one that had been doing the same amount for quite a few years. Do you have one that you can talk about that just was flatlined for 5, 10, 15, 20 years? You came in, you made some changes, and where were you able to take the company and in how long?
Yeah. So do you want me to talk B2B or B2C?
What's more exciting?
Well, the B2C stuff's always exciting, right? Because it's
Okay.
but this is
Let's go B to C because I think more of our audience might be able
okay.
to relate to that.
Well, let's talk beer.
Okay, everybody
So,
knows that.
so everybody knows that. So this was a brand. It was a Japanese beer brand
Hmm.
that only sold in Japanese restaurants.
Hmm.
So if you went to sushi, it was always one of your options.
Hmm.
their challenge to us was we need to broaden our market. We need to get out of sushi. We need to get into regular restaurants. We need to get into consumers' homes
Mm-hmm.
because the only time people think about this brand is that. So one of the things that we did is we started doing research. We wanted to understand why somebody who loves sushi and drinks this beer didn't bother to buy it outside. So it got to be a mindset, right? You went, this is what you bought when you're in a Japanese or a Chinese restaurant,
Right.
but you just didn't think about it, right? Because you liked your Budweiser or whatever brand. I'm not a big beer drinker per se. And so we started as a foundation to do that research and understand the perceptions of individuals and how they consumed and shopped for alcoholic beverages. I worked in the wine industry as well, and if you like wine, you go to the grocery store, and we call it the wall of wine.
Mm-hmm.
It's whatever 50 feet of thousands of 1,000 bottles of wine, and it's like, which one do I buy? Same thing with beer, right? You have your things you go to, but how do I get you to try something different, or to
Right.
say, I'm going to give you permission to drink this Japanese beer on a Saturday afternoon while you're by the pool.
Right.
And so by understanding all of that data, we were able to craft ultimately marketing campaigns that appealed and changed behavior and gave permission to do that. So the end result was at the end of it was about a 6 or 8 month campaign. They landed a 200 store chain, grocery chain, to carry their product. And so that was a huge achievement for them. Ultimately, as that started to expand, which was the other real cool benefit, Anheuser-Busch came in and bought them. And
Oh.
now they were playing with the big boys. And so
Yeah.
we had an opportunity now to go actually talk to Anheuser-Busch and talk about how do we migrate from a foreign beer, very niche foreign beer, to be a foreign beer to become a domestic consumption. And so we had this entire roadmap that was going to take a few years to get there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately we wanted to compete against Budweiser, if you will, one of their own
Mm-hmm.
brands, as a potential option versus just only Japanese beers or all foreign beers. And then, how do you migrate? So that was all about positioning and strategic moves and distribution issues, along with communicating, right? Giving you permission.
Right.
So that obviously for them, it was really successful because not only did they get their grocery distribution, they drew enough attention by Anheuser-Busch that ended up buying the brand.
So basically, in the process of your strategic marketing efforts, you got noticed by Anheuser-Busch,
Yep.
and you got noticed by the stores that was able to get that contract. So that's major. I mean, to be able to, for a company that's just kind of muddling along in the Japanese restaurants, the
Mm-hmm.
sushi houses, to all of a sudden being able to carry the product on a major grocery store, to even going farther than that and having an exit. I mean, that's like amazing.
Yeah. Well, they went national. I mean, all of a sudden they were a national brand
Right.
versus, again, niche in a very small market segment.
Right.
The another one I just recently worked on, and I didn't know this at the time when I was brought in, that they had gotten in the med tech space, they got an evaluation that they didn't think was. So when I came in, one of my assignments was how big was the market, and should we look at adjacent markets?
Hmm.
But it got beyond just that. We saw a lot of the prospects and the sales pipeline literally up there on the wall for a year or more in some cases.
Hmm.
So the question became, why can't we move? Why can't we close? Why can't we get there? What are the issues? And so we really working closely with the sales team and understanding process. And so we found some process issues that would help expedite kind of the closing rates. But what we found in looking at the market, so looking at TAM, SAM, and SOM. So for your listeners, TAM is total addressable market. SAM is the serviceable addressable market, but the SOM is a serviceable obtainable market. So looking at worldwide and bringing it down, our serviceable obtainable market in the United States for these class 3 med tech devices that we could service was $7.6 billion. Well, the company wasn't even close. They hadn't saturated that. So looking at existing products and services in the existing market segment, we laid a strategy to work to grow that and do better closure rates. But we also looked at adjacent markets so we could take the same services that we had and grow new market segments. For example, robotics was one of them. And so how do we start growing that market? We didn't have to go create new services. We didn't have to create new products. All we needed to do was start penetrating into that robotics market. Now, how do you do that? You send a bunch of people out knocking on doors? No, in that particular case, we executed a marketing, tactical plan. Emails, changes to the website, trade shows, trying to bring awareness that we were now a player in robotics. Before we started doing any big investments, right? So we just wanted to kind of, I'll use a fishing analogy, chum the waters, right? To see what kind of interest we could get.
Right.
While we were making changes and being more relevant to the market segments that we were dealing with and being a little more concrete, we could see some disconnects in their messaging and communications. And so we kind of changed a lot of that. So that was really more of we worked with their internal teams, a lot more of the tactical side once we got all the strategic stuff done and how we approached it and communicated. And that, allowed them to start landing more business. They had a lot of other things going on, but, doing better closure rates because, again, they were shortening the sales cycle in the way they communicated, a much broader exposure to the brand. They'd been around a long time, but they were still kind of a relatively unknown company.
Right. No, that's really good information. Now, once you have the strategy, once you've learned what would be compelling to potential clients to buy your product or your service, how do you increase the closure rate and contribute to that? Because one part is to be able to say, hey, I can get in front of you and I can talk about the product, but the next step is to be able to close the deal. Do you help in setting up that team? I don't know if you call it a sales team, that can get in and actually talks to the client and have strategic conversations and ways to bring in the client and basically close the deal.
Yeah. So I'm working with a new client right now. And so what we're doing is trying to understand from the internal standpoint where the disconnects between the guys in the field and management. And so we have that. We're getting simple things of the folks is how do they think of the business? How do they present the business? And I can tell you in most cases, whether it's 2 people, 10 people, or 30 people that are doing this work with me, they all have a different description. So then we look at gaps and inconsistencies. And so the goal is how do we start to bring that alignment together? So whether, you and I walking out the door have the same message about the company, because everybody that walks out the door is a brand ambassador or communicating. We want to make sure we're communicating the same way. But then we're also talking to their distribution channels. How are they perceived? What are their issues with the company? What do they like? What do they don't like? Why do they win? Why do they lose? And so by gathering all of that information allows us to say, okay, now we know what's important to these folks. We need to make sure we're really driving that message home. So whether it's in your communications, emails, whether it's in your, the sales team, whether it's your communications, whether it's your decks, whether it's the offers that you're making, these are the things that are important. Don't spend a lot of time talking about stuff that's not important, right? Here's how we get to it quicker. You got to show the value proposition. You got to show why it's relevant. A lot of companies make the mistake of talking, hey, we've been in business for 40 years and look at all the stuff that we accomplished. Nobody cares. Those are reasons to believe, not a reason to buy. gives you confidence. But what's relevant to me, how are you going to move my business forward? How are you going to help me be successful? And so flipping that script of being kind of customer-centric communications versus company-centric communications, right? I could sit here and talk about, hey, I've been in business for whatever, 11 years or 3 decades, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, you've shown the interest. How did you help companies move? How did you help them be successful? That I can see myself in that. And so that's always my focus is how can we do a better job of being relevant to your customers and then work backwards to make sure everybody that is customer facing, customer service people, salespeople, external sales, internal sales, whatever, manufacturing, whoever's going to touch somebody, they better be telling the same story because that constant reinforcement, it really helps build the strength of the brand.
Right. I think to interpret that, at least the way I see it, is what value you bring into the customer. Who cares, like you said, who cares what you've done? Is the value you bring to them, that's what gets their attention.
Yeah. I had a client that I worked on. They were a 75-year-old company. And when I talked to them about talking to their customers, they were like, they love us. Don't worry about it. I said, well, you know what? Let's think about this. Wouldn't it be nice to know that they do really love you and that everything is great? And maybe so. Long story short, they let me do that. And what we found out is a couple things. One, they were right. Their customers loved them. Number two, most of their customers were in their early 60s to late 60s and getting ready over the next 5 years to retire. So all of a sudden, the people that loved them, they've been working with for years, were no longer going to be there. Because part of their thinking was when I brought up younger engineers, they went, yeah, but they just go to the older engineers. Well, the older engineers aren't going to be there. When we dug down further, this new generation, that kind of 30 to 45-year-olds that were also doing work, they were turning to competitors. Why? Because the competitors were doing packaging deals and they were offering sustainable products. My client didn't have any of that. So just those two nuggets alone changed the way they communicated, from lunch and learns and getting out there and going around to their customers and not just relying on the fact that they have this history. And so again, that reshaped the way they communicated. They brought in new products to make sure that they were hitting that sustainability issue and environmental factors that they never touched before. And so, that's just another example of how that shaped kind of the strategy of the company and the products that they carried. Had nothing to do with, the tactical stuff. It was strategic changes that for the business that they had to make. And then they opened up offices in Hawaii. And so but that was a good old boy network. And these guys, that was a whole different challenge for them. How do you overcome that good old boy network? And yeah, you had a Hawaiian that was in there leading the company, but it was very obviously it was a California company. So again, how do you make those strategic changes and those issues, and how do you deal with those barriers that drive the tactical stuff, right? But you got to know what all those things are first.
That would almost, and correct me if I'm wrong, to say that it wasn't a seeking out new clients type of exercise. It was building what they had and with the clients they had. And would it be safe to say that their business grew just within that and stabilized even better?
Yeah, and that's always a good byproduct, right? If you're building relationships. I worked with a software company, same kind of thing. So when I did the research, what came out of it is they loved Becky. I forget the girl's name. They loved Becky, who was the customer service person who answered all their problems when there was issues. They had not seen leadership in years. The leadership, however, had created a new kind of a go-to-market strategy where some of the stuff they used to charge for was packaged in kind of you just got all these things. You just turn them on, right, in your software development. But their customers, nobody knew it. And so we found that they were getting ready to lose customers, that, they had to embed engineers in the companies. All this stuff was changing, and they had no clue because they weren't talking to anybody. Only Becky was, and Becky wasn't communicating. So I was the first person they talked to in years outside of her. And so my recommendation out of all that was, let's get a deck. Let's show your clients the new value proposition that you have for them, that all these things that they used to pay for are now free, and how you can take them to another level. Get on a plane and go to every one of these guys and do a road show. Don't worry about anything else, just that, because you got to lock this business down or you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
But that just came from investigating. Now, the big mistake that companies make is they do it, it's like a one and done, right? Hey, we hired Ponzi, he talked to our customers, he looked at our competition, yada, yada, yada. And maybe we'll do it, next year. No. This stuff is ongoing. You have to keep your fingers on the pulse of what's going on, because I always assume your competition is looking at you. They're talking to your clients, and you need to, this is kind of that ongoing strategic, I'll call it planning, but strategic issues, working on the business, not just in it. It needs to be a kind of a regular cadence and not just your annual strategic planning session in October.
Right. No. That makes a lot of sense. Wow. That's a lot of information you've been sharing with us, and a lot of knowledge in that. And now, what exciting plans do you have for the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, you know what? It's being a small business, there's that kind of, you're doing the work, you're chasing the work. So I do a good balance of networking and things like that. But the business has grown over the years, and I really enjoy what I do, and I'm doing more podcasts. I'm doing more public speaking again. I was public speaking all the time, and then COVID kind of killed all that. And so I'm getting that back. I've given 3 or 4 presentations already, just in the first 5 months of the year. So I'm doing more of that. I actually just published a book a couple of weeks ago called The Strategy Blueprint, which basically everything we're talking about is about how to be more strategic in your work. And I think the only tactical thing I talk about is strategy versus tactics. It's all about strategy, because again, I believe wholeheartedly that the importance of that. So I got the book published, but yeah, some vacations with my wife. I play music, and I got a band, and playing some more gigs, and trying to
have
enjoy
some
life.
fun, right?
Yeah.
Work hard, play hard.
You have to.
Wow, very good. Well, thanks so much, Angelo, for joining us and for sharing all your insights. Now, if somebody who's listening would want to get a hold of you, how could they do that?
Well, the easiest is find me on LinkedIn, and access to my website, and I have a lot of free stuff up there, and videos, and a lot of we blog a couple times a month, so a lot of articles they could get on my email list. But the website, the LinkedIn will get you to all of that stuff. It's probably the easiest way to find me.
All right. Well, thank you, Angelo, for being our guest. And to our audience, please go to ocpowerplayers.com and follow us on your favorite channel. Thanks so much, Angelo.
All right, Danny, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Orange County Power Players. Want to share your success story? Apply to be a guest at ocpowerplayers.com/guest.